Welcome to the ThunderCast, your Marshall Athletics podcast produced by the fans, for the fans, with your hosts, Russ Livingood and KD Hudnall. We're bringing you the thundering word on the thundering herd each and every week, so keep it right here. The ThunderCast is on the loose. Thanks for downloading another episode of the ThunderCast. You can follow us on Twitter at ThunderCast_pod. Also, proud members of the College Huddle Podcasting Network. You can find them at thecollegehuddle.com. Russ, big, huge game on tap. The herd is heading up to Blacksburg, Virginia to face the Virginia Tech Hokies for the second consecutive season. And we have your ComAssistKY.com Virginia Tech preview. That's right, ComAssist. We coach, you grow. Russ, the game is going down on September the 7th at 4:30 p.m. on the CW. For those that aren't going to Blacksburg to watch the game, the line has moved, opened up at Virginia Tech -14. Now currently, as we record, Virginia Tech -20.5 with an over and under of 51.5. The power index has also moved. Now Marshall has a 40% chance to win this weekend against the Hokies. This will be the 15th all-time meeting between Virginia Tech and Marshall. The Hokies own an 11-3 win-loss record against the herd. Marshall did, though, win just last season at Joan C. Edwards Stadium, 24-17. But the herd has never won in Blacksburg, Virginia. We came close many years ago in an overtime thriller, but just came just short. So the herd's looking to get that first win in Blacksburg, go 2-0 in 2 seasons against the Hokies, and push that one-loss record up to 11-4 all time. I've got a new segment that I want to start for our previews this year, and I'm just calling it 3 big questions. And there's 3 my personal questions going into this game of can Marshall do this or will Marshall be able to do that? Before I get into my 3 big questions, do you have any notes, any of your own bullet points before as we get into this?
Yeah, this one's not so much about the X's and O's or the Jimmies and the Joes. It's about 40% chance of victory, which last week was 25%. That is eked up. But the way I understand it, that's on 1,000 simulations. So that would mean that we came out ahead 400 times and they came out ahead 600 times in that 1,000. So we get 40%. I understand how all that goes. Vegas generally has a really good idea as well of what would be a competitive game. And they look for Virginia Tech to win by 3 touchdowns. So something has to give when you take those 2 scenarios. That we have a 40% chance of not covering the spread, but of winning outright. But they are looking at 21 points better than us, 20.5. It just looks like somebody has this drastically wrong. And it's got to be somewhere there in the middle because I don't see this as like, well, either Virginia Tech ekes out or loses, or they win blowing us away. You know, I just don't see it that way. I see it if we're evenly matched, it's going to be a close game. I don't see us getting blown out. I'm thinking of coming out of retirement, downloading the app, making my first ever bet, getting back into there, and taking the herd plus 20.5. It looks really, really good to me right now.
It does seem a little weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, 40% chance, but you're a 21% or 20.5% dog. Something doesn't add up.
But the line has moved nearly an entire touchdown. You know, you're not talking about a point or 2 or a field goal even.
Yeah.
It's moved an entire – now, look, I know they got stuff to prove. I know it's their home opener, and they've got to win a game. Like, they've got to win. And if you talk to their fan base or listen to snippets from some of their fan-driven podcasts, they expect to come in and beat the freaking brakes off of the herd this week. They think that's what they think is going to happen, right? And I'm sure they thought the same thing a year ago. We're just going to march into Huntington, West Virginia and beat the brakes off of Marshall. Well, that didn't happen either. And I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be a blowout victory for either team unless turnovers come into play, and that's the equalizer, and you just never know, right? But all things being considered equal, and turnovers don't just go crazy in this game, it it feels like a close to average win for either team,
Hmm.
or a close to average loss for either team. I don't feel like
Hmm.
anybody's just overpowering anyone.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads right into my three big questions for me for Marshall.
Okay.
Number one being, who starts at quarterback for the Herd? Right, Stone Earl came in, played the lion's share of the game, ended up not being the leading passer. I'm not sure he was head and shoulders above more efficient than Braylon Braxton. So who actually will get the start? Do you see the Herd switch it up? Will Braxton get the start for the Herd? Will they stick with Earl? Was this a bit of gamesmanship like I had speculated for Huff in week one? Was Braxton going to be the guy all along against Virginia Tech, and Stone Earl gets the start for the Herd against Stony Brook? I don't know. All interesting scenarios, but for me, that's the number one big question. Who's going to be uh, the starting quarterback for Marshall? Do you think we see a switch?
I do. I actually think it'll be Braxton. I think that we gave Earl 9 series versus Braxton's 3 in order to give him a little bit more familiarity, just so he would be ready as a backup. I think that Braxton probably is the more elusive of the two. Earl surprised me with his wheels. I thought he did a very good job running. But I just look for it to be Braxton. Coach Huff said that they will decide on Saturday who's going to be that QB1, probably during this game. But I also think that if somebody comes out and they have the hot hand, whoever it is, they're staying in there. If they come out and they're cold, somebody else is going in there. I think that we can all agree on that.
Well, that's what is the most telling to me, and why I asked the question is because they haven't said early in the week, Stone Earl's our guy. It's we'll
Mm-hmm.
make that decision later in the week. And if you're making that decision later in the week, it feels like a little bit more gamesmanship, right? That's what it is. You don't put a whole lot on film for Braxton in week one. You got the predominant film is going to be on Stone Earl, so it feels like there's going to be a switch up here for the week two. But neither guy really blew me away in week one, which is like, okay, so who was more efficient in that game? And I feel like Braylon Braxton was more efficient.
Yep.
And you take away the big 67-yard pass play that we've talked about a bunch of times, or just a blown coverage type thing, but he still looked pretty good. He still threw a really sharp ball. He still made some really good reads, read his progressions better than I think
Mm-hmm.
Earl did earlier in the game, and is also able to pick up first downs with his legs just like Earl can do. It's nothing against Stone Earl,
Mm-hmm.
but I just feel like this is going to be Braxton's opportunity to take a hold of the starting job and grasp it for the remainder of the season. That's
Mm-hmm.
just what I feel like. Number two big question for me, Russ, is Virginia Tech has reportedly down two starting offensive linemen. Can the Herd defensive line have more success, meaning continuing the success that they saw in week one? Can they have more success? Will Gibby and Legs be back in the rotation and on the field? And if they're not, will Jabari Ishmael be able to play that great bookend to Mike Green? Can Chris Thomas continue to be dominant on the interior? Will Landon Watson actually come up and make some more plays along that defensive line type thing? Will you see some stunts this week to try to get new angles for Mike Green? Are they going to exploit those the weaker side of the line? All those type of things. Um, do you have a response to that question as well?
I do. Even if Virginia Tech was at full strength with their 5 starters, I thought that our defensive line matched up very well with them. That is no slight to them. That is more about the strength of our defensive line. If you go back and look at who we brought in as depth pieces over the offseason, and you go back and look at what they've done at previous stops, you look at their recruiting that they had. the intangibles, the strength, the speed, the size that they have. We have some absolute animals on defensive line. You mentioned a lot of them, but don't leave out DV Harris from Colorado, JJ Hawkins from Colorado, Jason Shuford that came over from East Carolina. We have not seen Jacarius Clayton. I don't know if he's going to redshirt or if he was hurt or whatever, but we have a lot of weapons. And oh, by the way, we might see Legs and Gibby back in there at your two interior defensive line spots. And we know what those guys can do.
Right.
But I don't know the extent of why they're out. If they're out this week, that also gives them an additional off week next weekend before the week after that you go up to face Ohio State. Maybe they will leave them out to heal up whatever's nagging them, the reason that they weren't in that first game. If they play, I see us pushing that line around quite a bit and getting to drones, getting to Tootin in the backfield for some stops, or at least limiting him from picking up 5 and 6 at a time by having our big boys on the interior if they play.
Third question for me heading into this game is, can the Herd defense shut down that Hokies run game that Vanderbilt was so successful at doing? Hokies racked up only 75 yards rushing as a team in an overtime game, Russ. And you know, if you can keep Virginia Tech from running and you can force them to be one-dimensional, Kyron Drones had his best statistical game as a Hokies quarterback, and they lost, right? And how many times did we see that from our own team last year? Cam Fancher had his best statistical passing game, but you couldn't get the win because, you couldn't effectively run the football. So can this Herd defense continue to stifle the Hokies run game for a second consecutive week?
Can they? Yes. Will they? That is a big question. I just don't know if you're going to limit on 16 runs Kyron Drones from getting more than 19 yards. I know a lot of those were from the 4 sacks, but he did not have that really long run like he had against us last year, or the just absolute bruising, picking up your third downs that he can do. But Tootin only had 9 carries. It's one of those things where they were down, so they had to throw more. They couldn't just, run the clock out. They had to do something through the air. They were down 17-0 at halftime. So they were kind of forced to throw a little bit more. I don't know if we hold them to 75 yards, but I think if we can hold them to 100 or 125, that's still pretty good considering Drones and Tootin and, some of the jet sweeps that we'll likely see from Jennings, Lane, a couple of other guys that we have on there, even Gosnell. It would be one of those, yes, we can, don't know if we can type deals.
Yeah. So those are the 3 big questions that are surround this game for me. There are many, many more and a lot of games within the games that folks will need to keep an eye on. But we've got to talk about some of these players for Virginia Tech. And there was some speculation around the status of Kyron Drones after the game against Vanderbilt. Head coach Brent Price said he came off late with cramps. So it's not an injury. It was just cramps. He stated that he will be QB1 for Virginia Tech against the Herd in week 2. So Marshall fans can put that one out of their thought process. You are not going to see a backup quarterback against Marshall. It will be Kyron Drones. Last week he went 22 of 33, 322 through the air, 2 touchdowns and an interception. He was sacked 4 times against Vanderbilt. He did add 16 carries for just 19 yards. And of those 19 yards, 13 came on 1 rushing play. So still very much a dual threat guy. That just lends itself to, can Marshall get to him? Can they get him off this spot? Can they wrangle him down a few times in the backfield? All that sort of stuff. Leading rusher last week for the Hokies was Bashal Tootin. You mentioned 9 carries, 34 yards, and a touchdown, 3.8 yards per carry. Had a long of 24, though. So another 8 carries for just 10 yards for Tootin. He did add 6 receptions out of the backfield for another 18 yards and a touchdown. So again, another dual threat weapon for the Hokies. And then a quartet of wide receivers that kind of did a little damage last week against Vanderbilt, a name that a lot of Herd fans are familiar with that we've faced before, but for another team. Ollie Jennings, the one-time Old Dominion Monarch, former West Virginia Mountaineer, now current Virginia Tech Hokie, led the team last week in receiving yards. He had just 2 receptions, but he had 91 yards and a touchdown, 45.5-yard average with a long of 62. Stephen Gosnell had 3 receptions for 72 yards, 24-yard average, and a long of 44. Then Jalen Lane and Benji Gosnell had nearly mirror image games of one another. Both 4 receptions, 62 yards for Lane, 61 yards for Benji Gosnell, 15.5 yards and 15.3-yard average respectively, and both guys with a long of 26 yards. What the heck were those 2 dudes doing to have basically the same exact game? All right, so when you think about this Hokies offense, outside of Drones, because we were fortunate enough to get him in his first career start last year, and he played well. He's a season older, a season more developed, and a better quarterback. What worries you the most about this Virginia Tech offense?
Well, it's just the playmakers and the weapons that they have. Jennings is always able to take it to the house. Drones, with his legs, is able to take it to the house. He has a big-time arm. Lane at wide receiver, Gosnell at wide receiver, Gosnell at tight end, is a huge threat. Tootin out of the backfield is a big threat. So they've got a lot of weapons to throw. They've got a lot of weapons on the ground that they can do. Like I said, they did a lot of motion and jet sweeps, fake jet sweeps, fake the jet sweep, run with drones. It's almost like an option or a triple option there with a new look from a spread offense using the wide receiver sweep. So there's a lot of different ways they can come at you. It's a very, very, it could get out of hand if you don't play your best defense kind of deal, because their offense is super powered.
Yeah, so fortunately, Marshall's really strong on the defensive side of the football. We boast one of the best defensive lines in the conference. In fact, according to Phil Steele, it's the #1 defensive line in the entire Sun Belt Conference. Feel really good about where we are along the secondary, and versus what we saw against Stony Brook, feel a hell of a lot better about that second level of the defense and the linebackers. So let's talk about this Hokies defense. They're led by linebacker Kelly Lawson, a guy that we talked about last year. 6'6", 220. He's a junior now. 9 total tackles last week, and 7 of those solo. Followed up by safety Mose Phillips III, 6'2", 193, sophomore. 7 total tackles, 2 solo, and a half a tackle for loss. Then their second linebacker ended up being number 3 tied for second with tackles last week. Sam Brumfield, 5'11", 225. He's a senior. 7 total tackles, 1 solo. Then they had a quartet of players with 5 tackles each. And then impact plays for Virginia Tech against Vanderbilt. Just 2 sacks all day long. 7 tackles for loss kind of opened your eyes a little bit. And 2 passes defended. That's it. So from an impact play standpoint, Virginia Tech did not get after Vanderbilt very much. And Vandy breaking in a transfer quarterback. He was a Conference USA guy last year. I think he played at New Mexico or New Mexico State, one of them. And so they were just not able to get to him. The Herd with some mobility in the quarterback room. Like to see that impact play category minimized for Virginia Tech, at least for one more week. So what about this Hokies defense? Has your radar turned on?
Well, definitely what we saw out of Lawson last year. He had that, I think he was the one that had that interception
I think so.
in the linebacker. 6'6", he's kind of hard to throw over. Got a long wingspan and everything, and he led him, like you said, 9 total tackles, 7 solo, 2 assists. Dorian Strong is very good at cornerback to be a shutting down wide receivers. And then their defensive line with Powell, Ryland, and Peebles, seems like that they have quite a bit of weapons there on their defensive line as well. So we'll see how they match up against our offensive line that had a very good week last week.
Last note for me on these players is kicker John Love for the Hokies. Went 2 of 2 last week on field goals with a long of 40 and 3 on extra points. Hate to see this one come down to a kicking game, but if it does, you know that Virginia Tech has themselves a capable kicker, at least from 40 and in. Let's talk about some keys to victory, Russ. What do you got for your number one key to victory for the Herd this week?
Before that, I want to say Love is one of the most accurate in the nation. So it's not just from 40 in or 44 in. He has the leg to boom it, and he had a 90.2%, I believe, overall last year. So when they get into his range, he's nearly automatic. Number one key to victory for me is strike early. We cannot get behind and let Virginia Tech have the momentum on their home turf. If we come out slow and we have to play from behind, that kind of puts an air of panic into us. It puts maybe that we have to force it. Maybe we have to throw more, get one-dimensional on our end. So I don't want to see that. And it is an intimidating place to play. They have that wildly intimidating inner Sandman when you come in and the stadium is rocking. It's a hard place to go play and get a victory. So we have to come in and take the wind out of the sails early, put some points up early. So one, we can show them we're here, hopefully take the crowd out of it just a little bit, and then hopefully not have to play from behind.
Yeah, that's actually my number 3 key to victory for Marshall. So I'm going to go ahead and piggyback right off of that. It's you got to take an early lead and then avoid that crowd engaging play. They're going to be hyped up from the intro. So whether you get the ball to start the game or you're going on defense, one of the two, you're either going to need to get that turnover first or get that 3 and out and get the ball back immediately and shut that crowd up. Or you're going to need to go right down the field and at least put a field goal on the board and shut that crowd up, right?
Yeah.
So this place, I don't know. There are many loud, like intimidating environments. But personally, I think Virginia Tech has the greatest intro in college football. So I'm not sure that there is a team or an environment that comes out as hyped from the get-go as Virginia Tech. You've got to silence that crowd. You cannot give them a reason to stay in the game often, especially early on. What's your number 2 key to victory?
Number 2 for me is to force Drones out of the pocket with a lot of pressure and make him throw on the run. If you give him time to set and make a throw, he's got an absolute cannon. He's very accurate. He can kill you. I think that from what I've seen, I went back and watched their week 1 game. I saw last year, both in the prep, some other games that I watched, and the game that we watched live and then watched the replay of. He seemed to throw better when he got set than throwing on the run. People listening and watching may go, really? That's pretty much everyone. However, it was very noticeable. He seemed to just not be anywhere near as accurate. He seemed to make worse decisions. A lot of that was because he maybe had to abandon his first and second read because he had to scramble away. So everything really broke down for them when he did not have time to throw. So I think that you've got to get him out of that pocket and put a lot of pressure on him all game long and force him to either decide to tuck it and run or to make a bad throw.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. And Marshall does have the guys to keep him off of his spot and keep him running. I won't say running for his life, but they're going to keep him on the move most of that game, if not all of that game. My number 1, though, key to victory for Marshall this week is the baller's got a ball. We saw a lot of guys make a lot of plays for Marshall in week 1. And so now we know that there are guys that are capable of getting involved in a game early and contributing to that game. So I think it takes a lot of pressure off of any 1 or 2 particular guys, right? We saw so many wide receivers make plays, 5 different ones or 4 different ones found the end zone, 3 different, I don't know, however many found the end zone. But, man, Marshall's got a receiving core now that was a question mark for us a year ago. Do we have the amount of weapons that we need to be able to spread the ball around? Yeah, we sure do. And guess what? We didn't even involve the tight ends in week 1. So there's nothing on film for Virginia Tech to study with those guys unless they want to go back to watch that game last year, which assuredly they will. But even then, that won't have anything with Toby Payne on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just offense, that's defense as well. We saw a lot of plays being made from many defensive guys. It wasn't just the Mike Green show, right? It was Green and Ishmael really had their way with that Stony Brook line and was able to get into the backfield a lot. Landon Watson found himself in the backfield a lot. Jaden Yates was in on a shit ton of tackles. A lot of these defenders were in and around the football. You mentioned however many assisted tackles there were in the total across the entire game. Marshall swarmed, and they're going to have to do that again. You can't put all the onus on one or two guys to go out and win this game for you. It's not going to happen. It's going to take a full team effort and a lot of guys making the play when their number's called in order for Marshall to get a win in this game. What's your number 3 key to victory?
We have to dominate the field position battle. If you let Virginia Tech get to their 30, it's nearly automatic at least 3 points every time. Like I said, John Love has a great leg. He's got a lot of distance. So if you get to the 30, it's a 47-yarder for him. Give them a short field. They could go 3 and out or, 6 and out and still be putting points up on the board. And you just cannot do that. You can't have that. So we need to get them, do long drives. If we come away without scoring, we need to pin them back and force them to go all the way down the field. We have got to keep them out of that short field.
My number 3 key to victory for the Herd is they got to exploit the mismatches this week. There will be some. They are not better than us at every single position across all sides of the football. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen, and it's not going to be that way this week. So we have to exploit the mismatches. If they're weak on the offensive line, that's where we need to put our better penetrators and better rushers to get to those guys and force them to be better than they otherwise would have to be, right? I like our 4th wide receiver matching up against their 4th corner. I like some of these situations that are going to present themselves to where Marshall can make, even if it's a scenario where you get to move the ball 10 or 12 yards, then you need to exploit that mismatch and get 10 or 12 yards closer. That's big to me. And I don't think I can overstate it because you're going to have these moments to where a mismatch will occur. And if you don't exploit it, then it's an opportunity lost because good coaches will recognize that and you won't see it again. So you're going to have potentially one opportunity in this game to maximize at any given time. And if you don't do it, it's gone forever. What's your number 4?
My 4th and final is to limit the penalties and keep the turnovers down. We obviously did that in the first game against Stony Brook. We had 1 10-yard holding penalty, and that was it. We had 0 turnovers. If we could replicate that, we are put in a very good position against Virginia Tech. If you turn it over a lot, it's not going to be a good day. So we have got to limit our penalties, keep the turnovers down, prevent us from beating ourselves and making it easier on them.
My number 4 key to victory for Marshall is you got to punch back. You got to show some guts, and you can't just let one bad thing go against you, take you out of the game. They're going to score points. They're going to have however many thousands of fans behind them after every first down, after every touchdown, after every field goal, after every positive thing. That place is going to get loud. And you have to be able to punch back. You can't fold, right? And nothing about Marshall has told me that they will fold, but you can't do it. If you're going to go into an environment like this and hope to get a win in a place you've never won, then you have to go punch for punch. In the years we came the closest to winning in Blacksburg, that's exactly what we did. We went punch for punch. And then when you came up for air at the end of the game, they got one more lick in than you did, right? And that's the type of thing, that character thing, that gut check thing that you have to do. All those guys that are on that roster that are pulling that jersey across their chest this weekend are there for a reason. They were chosen to be there, and they earned their spot to be there. Now you got to act like it. Now you got to go out and show. that it doesn't matter what the logo is on the side of your helmet. You got to beat me one-on-one when we're matched up against one-on-one. You're going to get your punch in where I'm going to punch back. You might knock me down, but I'm going to get back up. And then whoever is left standing at the end of the game, if you're playing like that, you really can't be mad if no matter what side of the outcome you come out on, because you didn't quit. You didn't back down or fold. Tough game. It's going to be a tough freaking game. We know that, man. Virginia Tech's hungry. You don't think they thought they were going to go into Nashville and beat Vanderbilt? Of course they did. I mean, look at how many fans traveled to Nashville.
Yeah.
They basically took over that stadium. They thought for sure they were going to go into Vanderbilt and get a win, and it didn't happen. So they're pissed. They're hungry, and honestly, their team needs a win. Their team needs a win. Russ, who'd you got for your MVP this week?
MVP for me is Elijah Metcalf. He was that for me last week post game, and I see more of the same this game. I see us getting the ball to him in creative ways. He is also on special teams as the punt returner. So I see him having quite a few touches and being able to impact the game by flipping the field on a punt return, maybe taking one to the house. Every time he touches the ball, Smooth is a threat to take it to the end zone. And he found it twice in the first game. If he finds it 2 or 3 times in this game, I think he'll be our MVP again.
Yeah, good pick, man. Metcalf had a great game. I'm going to go 2 guys, one on offense, one on defense this week. Landon Watson is the wild card for me in this one because he played so well. I know they're going to be game planning big time to stop Mike Green, to limit what he can do. And if Landon Watson can ease that pressure a little bit, free up Mike Green, or if he can just exploit some of the added attention that's going to be coming at Green and Ishmael, he might find himself with the 2-sack day. He might be in that double-digit tackle realm. He was really close last week. He's my wild card this week. I think he's going to be the defensive MVP this week. And on offense, I'm going to A.J. Turner because of a story that was circulating around on social media this week about a recruiting trip that he went on there and was apparently forgotten about. And the coach went home and wow, mega yikes, right? So you can't tell me that this cat hasn't got some motivation to go out and play his best game ever in a Herd uniform. Granted, small sampling size. Yes, he went for 100 last week. He wants to go for 100 this week, and he wants to show them what they missed out on. We saw Rasheen Ali have the big game last year against Virginia Tech. A.J. Turner's got that burst. It's his time this week. I like him offensively to be my guy. As much as I want to see our wide receivers find the end zone a lot of times, hope they do. I hope A.J. Turner goes for $120 and finds the end zone twice.
Well, he's a threat catching it out of the backfield as well. So, it's a great pick.
Give me a score prediction this week.
I went back and forth several different times as I usually do, and I cannot stand picking against my beloved Herd, but I have to give it to Virginia Tech at their house. But I see it close. I do not see it anywhere near 20 and a half points. I said 34-31 in kind of a shootout going back and forth. I cannot wait to be wrong, and I cannot wait to be able to have to eat crow so we can say, yeah, look, we won, because I want us to win. But I'm just looking at everything that's there. We're due to be tested majorly by a team that I still think, no matter what they did in week 1, I still think Virginia Tech's going to make a lot of noise in the ACC this year, maybe win the whole thing. But I'm going to officially take Virginia Tech 34-31.
So 2 years ago, I picked against the Herd going into South Bend, and you did not. And you were right about that one. This time, I feel like Marshall's going to go into Blacksburg, and they're going to get a really, really, really close win. The hard-fought win that has been eluding us since the dawn of time of Herd games in Blacksburg. Give me 31-30 Marshall in what you're saying, kind of a shootout, but the gutsy, gut-it-out win to give Charles Huff a Power 5 win in 3 consecutive seasons. I like it, man. I don't know. Call me crazy. but I'm feeling good about the herd. I'm not shy about picking against Marshall from time to time. I feel good about this one though, and it has really nothing to do about the game against Vanderbilt last week. I think Vandy's actually going to win a couple of games. You know, they
Oh
won't
yeah,
make it. They won't make any noise in the SEC,
not in the
obviously,
SEC, right?
but they
They
will win
they've
some games.
they've got a great offense, man. Pavia looked really good. I watched that game; it was really good. Hey, before we get out of here, I do have to say, because of our logistics, we couldn't be on the Boundary Corner podcast, and we couldn't have the Boundary Corner podcast on our show for this preview. But a College Huddle podcast, just like us, we're part of thecollegehuddle.com. Boundary Corner podcast tonight, as we record this late on Wednesday, they had their live show. So it will be a preview that you can go check out, see what they have to say about Virginia Tech, what they have to see, what they think about Marshall. So all the Marshall fans, please go to boundarycornervt.com. You can also find them on YouTube or streaming on your favorite audio streaming platform. But go over and find our friends at the Boundary Corner and see what they have to say about this game.
That's right. You can find it really easy at thecollegehuddle.com. Russ, you got any final words on this game before we get out of here?
No final words on the game other than I'm going to be down there and I hope to see a bunch of Herd fans. So don't be shy. Come up and introduce yourself. I do want to say thanks again to ComAssist Kentucky, ComAssistKY.com. Go talk to Larry Nitardi. And as always, we have to shout out our title sponsor of this show, 304carwreck.com. Go there and let them help you the next time that you really need it the most.
All right. We've got a big game on tap. Looking to go 2-0 this week in this young season. Russ, take us out of here.
Whether you see us at the vet, whether you see us at the Cam, or whether you see us down at Blacksburg, tailgating our faces off and hopefully coming out with a win. No matter where you see us, we're always going to be saying, go Herd.
Go Herd. It's another ComAssistKY.com Marshall football game preview, and we'll see you next week with a recap. Later.